this is Tracey Welson-Rossman coming to you again from my home office. We're going to be talking with Don Coleman, who is our Chief Innovation Officer at Chariot Solutions, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer. And today we're going to talk about a project that Don's been working on for a client of ours that brings together some interesting elements of work that he's been doing in the Internet of Things space, IoT, as well as what we're looking at seeing an increase in this new sort of craze called property tech or PropTech. So Don, why don't we start off there? Let's talk about what property tech is, at least in our understanding.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not 100% sure what property tech is, but I'm pretty sure this is going to fall under property tech. So we try to be buzzword compliant on all our projects where possible. But basically, my understanding is property tech is applying technology, and particularly the Internet of Things, to property management to make life easier for the people that live in the properties, the people that manage the properties, things like that. So a lot of it is, taking things that were formerly just happening and capturing data or adding control to them or doing things like
that. With what's been happening in our world today around coronavirus, how do you see property tech being even more important for real estate managers, but also homeowners?
I mean, one of the nice things is if you're monitoring and controlling things remotely, you can potentially save a trip in to go physically look at something until there's actually a problem. So that'll help with social isolation, social distancing.
Social distancing, right.
So,
but beyond that, we're going to see the use of this. It's just accelerated the pace of remote monitoring, correct?
Yes, I would believe that it has.
And not everyone who is viewing is up to date with the Internet of Things. So why don't you just let's take a step back and talk a little bit about what IoT is and some of the things that you've been doing before we dive into this particular project.
Yeah, so the Internet of Things is basically, I used to refer to it as connected devices. Internet of Things is kind of what caught on. But we have all these devices that are electronic, that have a microcontroller in them, and they do something. They control the temperature in my house with a thermostat, or they're controlling a washing machine or doing other things like that. And so these devices go and do whatever they're doing. The Internet of Things is when you attach a radio, like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, stuff like that, and then you can add this device onto the internet. So now, instead of just being a standalone device that's doing something, it can send data off somewhere. It can receive commands from somewhere else. So it can add functionality, which is the good part. It adds some risks, which is the downside. But for the most part, it's adding more functionality to devices by connecting them to the internet.
And certainly we've been seeing more and more of these devices enter our homes, enter the rental properties, and hotels as well. So multi-family units, as we like to call them, or multi-residence units. So you mentioned thermostats, there's locks, there's security cameras. So you've been working on a project which works on water leak detection. So can you tell a little bit more about that without giving too much of the secret sauce away?
Yeah, so we're working with a company and they came to us. They have a device and they're concentrating on toilets. So the Internet of Toilets here at the beginning. That can detect water leaks in toilets. And sometimes there's a water leak where, water's overflowing on the floor. It's pretty obvious. Sometimes there's a water leak where a flapper valve is opening and it's running and a lot of water is going by. And then so they can detect both of those. But one of the things that they're really good at is these small leaks that you don't necessarily notice, but are wasting, tens to hundreds of gallons of water a day. So leaks that don't seem to be obvious. The other thing that they're doing is they're applying this to hotels and large apartment buildings, where in my house, if I had a toilet leaking, it's going to waste some water, but I can fix that. But in a hotel where you have hundreds of rooms, there's going to be, if there's a large percentage of those leaking, you're going to waste a lot of water. So it's bad from the environmental side. But also from the cost side, it's going to drive up the water bill and the sewer bill. And with a hotel, you have a lot of people cycling in and out. So people don't necessarily know what's normal and what's not normal. So the idea here is that they're going to put all these devices into the toilet tanks. They're going to be able to collect this data and find out what's leaking, what's not leaking, and then be able to have a plan for the maintenance people to go fix those leaks. You know, if something's a catastrophic leak, if it's overflowing or leaking, you know, thousands of gallons a day, they can leak a lot. They can go fix that right away. But if it's a slow leak, you know, they will work to schedule that to between when, you know, someone checks out of the room and the next person checks in the room.
So that's the business problem that they're looking to solve. So technically, can you get into, you know, how you're designing the piece of hardware plus the software? So they've designed the hardware piece, correct?
Yeah, so the company, they designed the, right, they have the intellectual property that figures out whether something's leaking or not. And one of the neat things about this is they can do it in a non-invasive way. There's some people doing this where you got to disconnect plumbing and put things into the water pipe to determine this. Their device actually just goes into the toilet tank. It runs on a battery, and I think they're going for a 5-year battery life. And so basically the installation cost is not very expensive. Someone lifts the lid off the toilet, drops this thing in, puts the lid back on, and it connects to the network and it goes. So
let's talk about our part. What did you design?
So, you know, we talked to them and they had this device working, and then they added a radio into it. So they had a non-internet connected version, and then they added a radio, which is now sending this data out. It sends the data out over LoRa, which is a long range, low power wireless technology, to a gateway. And so there's going to be a gateway in the hotel. And then the gateway will take this data and it will send it to the server. And so that's kind of where we come in. So we worked with them, and the gateway securely connects to the server, and Chariot Solutions implemented the server piece of this. We used Amazon Web Services to do this. So we have the AWS Core IoT gateway, and the gateway receives the traffic. And then when that traffic comes in, we have some rules where we process that data, and we kind of look at it and we say, well, is it coming from, you know, this place? We need to decrypt the data. And then since we're sending the devices in the toilets have to be very battery efficient, they pack the data very tightly, and they're sending very tiny messages. And so on the server, we expand that to see what else that means. We run it through a series of rules, we store it in the database. And we basically need to take this stream of information, which is coming from these devices, and figure out, hey, how much water has this used? Is it leaking? Is it not leaking? And our client, they really want to separate the water people intended to be used when there was a flush versus water that was unintentionally used where there was a leak, because we can stop that. We can't stop it. They can stop the unintentional leaks to save water and to save money.
So talk about some of the challenges when we're working in a situation, a room, and you've got to have a gateway. And if you can explain to people who don't know what a gateway is, just to do a quick review.
Yeah, so with some IoT devices, they'll have a Wi-Fi radio in them. And so a Wi-Fi radio, like in your house, could connect to a Wi-Fi base station. It could get out to the internet. The device could talk directly to the internet. And that works really good for some things. Wi-Fi has a few downsides. One, you need to configure it. You need to put that SSID and the password in, and a device without a screen and a keyboard makes that really tough. We could work around that. The other thing is Wi-Fi uses a lot of power. So we have this device that they want to last for 5 years running on some batteries. You can't do that with Wi-Fi because Wi-Fi uses a lot of power to be broadcasting all the time. So there's other technologies like Bluetooth Low Energy, LoRaWAN, things like that, Sigfox. And these technologies use, they have a lot of different nerdy things to make them more power efficient. They're broadcasting less often. They're doing all these things. They have different and less configuration. So in this particular case, they're using LoRa. which is very low power. We can send small amounts of data, but it can't go directly to the internet because it's sending this LoRa stuff. So there's a gateway which also has a LoRa radio, and it listens and it receives these messages. And once it receives the message, then it forwards it on using either Wi-Fi or cellular to the AWS server. So the gateway can talk directly to the internet, and the gateway can talk to all these devices that are installed throughout the property. And so it forwards the traffic. And then also, if the gateway gets a message, it can relay that back to one of these devices to say, update your configuration to send data less often, more often, etc.
That's really cool. So we're talking to the server, the solution. So you've created a way to take that information from the gateway back to the server. And then how are you displaying that information?
Right. So there's a couple different pieces to this. It's kind of like one system on the server side, but it's multiple pieces. The AWS Core IoT receives this stream of data. Then we have a set of rules that process on that data. We send those to some functions which do them different things. You know, they decode it, they store it in a database, they store it in a time series database. If someone needs to be alerted, we send a text message to somebody. All that kind of initial processing happens within AWS's IoT infrastructure. But then we also, for property managers, for the client, we want to have a user interface where they're able to log in and kind of look at details and be like, hey, how much water have I used over the month on this property, on this room, et cetera, et cetera. And so for that, we have a web application, which we have written in Django. And that web application uses the data from the database. We have a couple different databases when we're bringing data in, but we have a Postgres database where we've stored a lot of that information. And so our user interface for the people when they're interacting with the system goes against the database. We can update data, we can look at data, we can generate reports. That's all packaged and deployed onto Amazon Web Services also. So everything is hosted kind of in the cloud. Some of it's using these services that Amazon provides, and some of it's using the infrastructure like virtual machines and things like that.
So there's really this marriage of a business idea, hardware, and then having the hardware talk to the software, and that all of these need to come together to make the Internet of Things work.
Yeah, and that's kind of where this project was working really good with our client, because our client, they're hardware experts. They understand the hardware, they understand all the details of the algorithms, and they know how to make all the things that work in that hardware, taking the raw sensor data and interpreting what's happening with the water and then sending a signal to us. They were also good at the gateway, but once data got to the gateway and we wanted to configure the MQTT to get it to Amazon, that's really where we kind of came in, and there was a good handoff. They have their expertise, and then we really worked with them to get their vision. Hey, they want the software to do this, they want the user interface to do these things, and we were able to implement that for them and then hook it in so it all works as one giant system, delivering value for them and for their clients.
So just to wrap up, this is a new product that they're putting out to market. They're past their minimal viable product at this point. This is really a version 1.
So right now, we've gone through a few iterations of, as we start collecting more data and looking and interpreting that data on the server side, they've, made some changes to what they're doing. We have a couple test sites where we're gathering real data from real properties. And so they're working with that and putting that out. Really, the pandemic, I think, slowed things down a little bit since they were going into hotels and doing these things. But we're still moving forward with that. And I think it's just going to take them a little more time to get to market.
Well, great. And then probably from there, once they've tested the data, tested the product, seen what it's able to do, there's most likely going to be other uses for what they've put together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the problem set that they have, I can't recall the exact details, but the sheer number of toilets out there and the amount of water wasted is a really big problem. So as they're applying it to that, they have a lot of work cut out for them to get this product out there and deployed. But they have ideas around other ways to apply the same technology.
Right.
The gateways could collect data from other things if they're monitoring other water usage through different things. I mean, the big thing with property tech is there's other people that are building these smart properties. Yeah, I guess that's the right word. Building these smart properties and assembling all this tech. No one company is going to have all the tech they need. So they're going to use something like this from H2O Connected. They will use maybe a smart lock solution from another company. And then so they'll be building and assembling all these different pieces to truly make these smart buildings that have a lot of the functionality that are going to be either conveniences or cost savings or combinations of those for the residents and the owners.
Great. Don, thanks for your time. I know we'll be talking again soon because you're working on some really interesting projects. You know, this is what seemed impossible 10 years ago is becoming, it's like the Jetsons, I guess, when we were little. So, you know, what we didn't think was actually going to happen is going to come to reality. And it's just a question of time and need. So thanks for explaining this to us.
All right, thanks, Tracy.